Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a big breakthrough. I don't know if I've seen like a big breakthrough necessarily
Or is there
in
something they
like
taught
nutrition
you that you're
science.
like, oh, that's no longer true? Where they said, this is the way. This is what you need to know as a nutritionist. And now 10, 15 years later, you're like, actually, that's not the way.
Yeah, I think that there's probably been a ton of things, and for whatever reason my mind is
Yeah,
blanking because that's kind of the way of science.
yeah.
Like
Uh-huh.
I think that we're always learning, and nutrition is a baby science. Like I always like to say it's a baby science. We just discovered vitamins at like the beginning of the 20th century, the first few decades of the 20th century. And before and so we were really doing nutrition science research to prevent disease for the longest time. And then it obviously that has shifted now because now we're not really trying to prevent acute disease anymore, and we're not trying to prevent things like scurvy with a vitamin C supplement or with lemons. We're trying to figure out like what are the best dietary eating patterns to prevent disease. And I think there's been some very interesting work in metabolism
Mm-hmm.
and ultra processed foods. And so, thinking of like when I was kind of coming up, we didn't really talk about ultra processed foods a lot. We talked about them in the sense of like minimizing them, but we didn't really understand what. And there's been some very interesting work. Kevin Hall at the NIH did a lot of work with ultra processed foods and looking at just by the function of them being ultra processed, which I can define, which is basically in the nutrition science research, it's just an ingredient, like a food item that has an ingredient or a processing method that you don't have access to. So the best way to explain it, this is with the NOVA classification, and this is how we've explained it in nutrition science, is unprocessed would be something like corn that you pick from the garden. Processed would be or minimally processed would be like frozen corn. So just like frozen corn kernels, minimal processing. Processed would be canned corn because they add some salt into the can. And then ultra processed would be a Dorito chip.
Mm.
Right. So you can't replicate a Dorito chip in your kitchen because they use ingredients and processing methods you don't have access to. And I think we've learned a lot about kind of like the idea of those different kind of methods of processing over time and how like process is not necessarily bad. I mean, just adding salt is processing, right?
Yeah.
But this idea of like low nutrient ultra processed food where if you it includes salt, sugar, and fat in any combination of those, it makes it hyper palatable, right? And
Nice.
hyper satiating. And so Kevin's done some work at the NIH that showed that just by the function of foods being ultra processed and going through this processing, people would overeat those foods. So when you were kind of
Mm.
like left to your own volition and you could eat either the minimally processed or the ultra processed, they would overeat the ultra processed. And in his experiment, they overate 500 calories a day. So over the course of, a week, they gained 2 pounds.
1 week they gained 2 pounds.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
This is why it sounds like behavior change is also one of the big challenges for people. It's like, even if you have 80% of the good foods here, but you see these satiating kind of ultra processed foods, you still have to make a decision. Even if you only see a little bit of it here.
Yeah.
That's why I try to eliminate it from my home, because it's like the brain is craving that so much unless you override it for so long that you just have zero temptation.
Yeah, and I think the problem too with ultra processed is that there are different degrees of what ultra processed. So again, the definition that's used in nutrition science right now is just this idea that it has a ingredient or a processing method you don't have access to. So within that definition, that's why I kind of distinguish low nutrient ultra processed foods
Mm-hmm.
versus there are some like nutrient dense foods that just happen to be ultra processed. So, even like protein powder is ultra processed. You can't make a protein powder in your kitchen. And so,
Right.
and that's why right now there's like a request for information out to try to put a better definition on the word, what ultra processed actually means.
Mm-hmm.
Because currently that's not the best way to define food.
Interesting.
Because again, like there's a difference between a Dorito chip and a scoop of protein powder,
Yeah, of
right? So
course.
yeah, so that's like one of the things that I'm watching right now that again wasn't even really on my radar when I was going through school. I wasn't really thinking of like processing. I
Mm.
was strictly thinking of like the nutrients in a food. And I think that more and more
Right.
research is coming out about like the processing method and how it impacts our
Wow.
health.
I've got a few final questions for you before I get to them. I want people to make sure they check out your content because your social media is really powerful.
Thank you.
So it's, is it Dr. Jessica? And then
Merrick.
Nurick with a K.
Yeah.
KNURICK on social media, but also jessicanurick.com. You got a Substack as well, which I think you do a lot there.
Yeah.
That people can check you out, Dr. Jessica Nurick, on Substack as well. And a lot of helpful information backed by research and science. You're always trying to find the science around any claim out there, which I think is really cool. Speaking of the impact you've made, what do you think would be the greatest change that could happen over the next decade in nutrition, in food, in the health system, if we were able to make in the next decade? We're 10 years out in the future, 2035, and there's a big breakthrough that you'd love to see happen over the next 10 years. What would that be? Or what do you think is possible for us to create?
I think right now we're in this very unique opportunity. We're in a very unique time that presents an opportunity where a lot of people are starting to think about our public health systems and our food environment. We have this MAHA movement that's really happened, and they've brought attention and light to something that wasn't on people's radar before. And I think that presents a real opportunity to help people to understand what has gotten us to the place that we're in. So I think a lot of us, most of us, are concerned about the state of, lifestyle related chronic disease in this country. We're concerned about our food environment. We want to help people get healthier. And I think helping to channel that energy in the right place to make effective change is what I would love to see over the next decade. And so what that would look like was understanding why our food environment is the way that it is, understanding what policies. So a lot of this has to do with policy and how policy has really, again, first of all, corporate interests have a lot of say over our policy right now because of how campaign finance reform or because of how campaign finance laws are. So looking at campaign finance reform, a lot of people will be like, what's the first thing you would do? And I'll say that, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. How's that going to improve health?
Yeah.
And it's because right now, it's really hard to get public health policy passed in this country because public health policy doesn't tend to make corporations money. And so if you have a lot of corporate interests kind of fighting those policies, it can be difficult. So I think if we want to see a change in our food system, it has to start with policy. And so we have to look at our agricultural policy. We have to start incentivizing kind of local food systems and giving grants to local farmers to kind of produce food. And if you have the means, I like to separate this because if you have the means and the ability, trying to support local can be a really helpful thing to do, and help joining a CSA with your local farmer and like a meat share, type, so people share a cow or things like that.
Right.
But and that's one, but also just kind of investing from a systemic perspective, investing in local food systems so that we can start to kind of change our food environment so we're not so heavily reliant on these prepackaged ultra processed foods, right, that have to sit on the shelf for a long time. And we can start kind of reinventing our food system. I think that that's a big one. And so channeling people's energy to be able to kind of make that effective change, I think is something that I would push for over the next decade.
That's beautiful. Jessica, I want to acknowledge you for the work you're putting out there. Again, you've been pretty consistent over the last couple of years of just putting out great content and backing it by science. And again, in a world where so many people are confused about the information of all the different diets they could do, what foods are healthy, which ones are poisoning you, all these different things, you're bringing clarity to chaos in this nutrition health world. So I want to acknowledge you for your research, for your science-based content, and for trying to not scare people, but educate people on what's helpful, what's harmful, and what not to worry about. So I really acknowledge you for constantly doing this, and I hope you continue to do it. It's helping a lot of people. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more inspiring clips like this, make sure to click right here to subscribe and click right here to watch that next video that is specific to support you in your life.